I had always dreamed of owning a home in Los Angeles, a city filled with glitz and glamour, where the stars twinkled both in the sky and on the ground. My dream finally came true when I found a charming house on Laurelwood Lane, nestled away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was an old Victorian-style home, oozing with character and history. Little did I know, the history it held was not the kind they write about in guidebooks. The first time I laid eyes on the house, I was captivated. Its ornate architecture and lush garden seemed like something out of a fairy tale. The real estate agent, a chipper woman with a bright smile, assured me it was a steal. I couldn't believe my luck. I signed the papers and moved in, eager to begin my new life in the City of Angels. The first few weeks were peaceful. I spent my days exploring the neighborhood, enjoying the sun, and trying to fit in with the eclectic mix of neighbors. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a sinister presence began to creep over my home. It started innocently enough. A creak in the hallway, a shadow that darted just out of sight. I brushed it off as the quirks of an old house. But then the whispers began. Soft, barely audible at first, like the faintest of breezes rustling through the leaves. I strained to hear, but the words were indistinct, like secrets being shared just beyond my reach. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard my name. "Sarah," the voice whispered, sending a shiver down my spine. I sat up, heart pounding, and scanned the room. Nothing. Just the moonlight casting eerie shapes on the walls. I told myself it was my imagination playing tricks on me, that moving to a new place can make anyone jumpy. The whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. They were no longer confined to the night. During the day, I would hear them emanating from the walls, as though the very house itself were speaking to me. My nerves were fraying, and sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. One evening, as I tried to unwind in my living room, I heard a child's laughter. It was clear and joyful, as if a child were playing right beside me. But there was no child. I was alone, or so I thought. The laughter echoed through the house, and I followed it, my heart racing. As I ventured down the hallway, I noticed a door I had never seen before. It was a small door, almost hidden beneath the grand staircase. I reached for the handle, and the laughter grew louder. It felt like it was pulling me in, a siren's call that I couldn't resist. The room beyond was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a nursery, frozen in time. The walls were adorned with faded pastel wallpaper, and dusty toys were scattered across the floor. But what caught my eye was a rocking chair, moving on its own accord. Back and forth, as though someone were sitting there, rocking an invisible child. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This couldn't be real. My mind must be playing tricks on me, but the room was undeniably there, and the laughter continued, growing more unsettling with every passing second. I decided to seek help, convinced that I was losing my mind. I reached out to my neighbors, hoping they could shed some light on the history of the house. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Hutchinson, had lived on Laurelwood Lane for decades. Her eyes widened when I mentioned the nursery. "Oh dear," she said, her voice quivering. "You found it, haven't you?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "That room," she continued, "it's cursed. Long ago, a family lived here, and they had a child, a sweet little girl named Emily. But tragedy struck. Emily disappeared one night, and they never found her. The family was devastated and moved away, leaving the house to its dark secrets." Mrs. Hutchinson's tale sent shivers down my spine. She warned me to leave, to get out while I still could. But I was stubborn. I refused to be driven from my own home by whispers and laughter. As the days passed, the activity in the house escalated. Objects moved on their own. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and the whispers grew into anguished cries. I couldn't escape it, couldn't find respite anywhere in the house. One night, As I lay in bed, I felt a presence beside me. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. A cold, malevolent force. It whispered my name again, only this time it was no longer a whisper. It was a scream that filled the room, a scream of pain and rage. I screamed too, scrambling out of bed and fleeing the room. But the presence followed me, trailing me like a shadow. I was trapped in my own nightmare, and there was no way out. Desperation drove me to research the history of the house further. I discovered that the child, Emily, had indeed disappeared without a trace, and the family had left the house in grief. But there were no records of her ever being found, dead or alive. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The more I learned, the more I became convinced that Emily's spirit still lingered in the house, trapped in a never-ending torment. I knew I had to find a way to help her, to free her from whatever held her captive. I turned to a paranormal investigator, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Blackwood, who specialized in cases of hauntings and restless spirits. She arrived at my home with a sense of purpose, her equipment in hand. She, too, had heard the whispers and felt the malevolent presence. Together, we entered the nursery, determined to make contact with Emily's spirit. Dr. Blackwood set up her equipment, and we sat in silence, waiting. The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. Then, a soft voice, not a whisper, but a voice, spoke. "Help me," it said, the words filled with sorrow. Dr. Blackwood spoke gently, asking Emily to reveal herself. And she did. The room seemed to come alive with energy, as a faint figure materialized before us. It was Emily, a ghostly child with sad eyes and a tattered dress. She looked at us, her gaze filled with longing. Tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't bear to see this poor child trapped in such misery. Dr. Blackwood spoke to Emily, offering her words of comfort and understanding. Slowly, Emily began to recount her story. She had been a happy child, playing in the nursery day after day. But one fateful night, a man had come into her room. He was a stranger, with eyes that held darkness within them. He had taken her away, into the depths of the house, and locked her in a hidden chamber. She had cried out for her parents, but they never came. Emily's story sent chills down my spine. It was a tale of cruelty and unspeakable horror. Dr. Blackwood, with great care, helped Emily find her way to the light, guiding her to a place where she could finally be at peace. As Emily's form slowly dissipated, a sense of calm settled over the house. The whispers ceased, the laughter faded, and the malevolent presence lifted. I knew that Emily was free, finally released from her torment. In the aftermath, I decided to leave Laurelwood Lane. The house had been tainted by its dark history, and I couldn't bear to stay there any longer. I sold it to a family who knew nothing of its past, hoping that they would find happiness within its walls. As I drove away from the house for the last time, I couldn't help but glance back at it in the rearview mirror. It stood there, a silent sentinel, hiding its secrets behind its Victorian facade. I knew that I had escaped the horrors that lurked within, but I couldn't help but wonder if the new occupants would one day hear the whispers, the laughter, and the screams that had haunted me for so long. The house on Laurelwood Lane had a history that could not be erased, a history of darkness and despair. And though I had helped one soul find peace, I couldn't help but fear that the house itself would forever remain a place of nightmares, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred into something truly terrifying.